Why is it that the man who says nothing is the one she can't forget? It's strange, isn't it? Not the one who begged, not the one who over-explained, not the one who tried to prove he was unforgettable. They all vanish in the noise, because deep down, they were still asking to be chosen. But the one who said nothing, he's the one she replays again and again in her mind, not because he disappeared, but because he withdrew with clarity, not confusion, not because he was cold, but because he held a silence she never saw coming. A silence that didn't beg, didn't perform, didn't chase validation. It just existed, firm still, unshakable. That's what unsettled her, because the silence, it wasn't empty, it was exact. It wasn't pride, it was peace. And that peace, it echoed louder than all her expectations combined. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it's the final boundary of a man who's done explaining his worth. So if you've ever wondered why your calm hits harder than any argument, why your stillness can shift the entire dynamic, then start this journey now. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and in the comments, drop a 1 if you've ever broken the pattern by going quiet. Drop a 2 if you're just starting to learn how. I want to hear your story, because what comes next, it's not revenge, it's reversal. She expected chaos, but you gave her something far more disruptive: stillness. Let's dive in. 1. She expected drama. You gave her silence. She didn't leave you expecting to lose you. She left expecting movement, your movement, the late-night message, the long emotional text, the voice memo trying to make sense of everything. She expected the pattern she had come to rely on, the cycle of rejection followed by your apology, her silence followed by your validation. She knew your rhythm. She counted on your need for closure. So when she walked out, she didn't close the door behind her. She left it slightly ajar, assuming you'd come chasing after it, that you'd rush to make things right, just as you always had. Because to her, leaving wasn't a true ending. It was a power move, a silent dare. And she was already imagining the reply she'd get, the control she'd reclaim. But this time, something was different. You didn't text. You didn't call. You didn't react at all. She reached for the familiar script, and it was blank. You didn't give her the drama. You gave her distance. You didn't plead. You paused. You didn't yell. You went still. She expected chaos. You gave her calm, and that calm wasn't quiet because you were weak. It was quiet because you were clear. That's what cracked her foundation, because she realized it wasn't your heartbreak she feared. It was your indifference. The way your absence didn't demand attention, didn't seek revenge, didn't chase closure. It simply was. And that stillness, that unbothered space where your old reactions used to live, forced her to confront something she never thought she would. The possibility that you weren't just silent. You were finished. She replayed her exit expecting an echo, expecting backlash, expecting resistance. But your silence said everything. It wasn't avoidance, it was transformation. A kind of strength that doesn't scream. A kind of presence that doesn't need to prove anything. And in that void, she stopped wondering when you'd reach out, and started wondering if she ever truly knew you at all. Because nothing disarms a woman who craved reaction more than the man who finally stopped performing. You didn't go silent to punish her. You went silent because your peace mattered more than her validation, and when that became clear, the power dynamic shifted for good. You weren't the one left behind. You were the one who walked away, without a word, without regret, and without looking back. 2. Predictable men get forgotten. She used to know your every move, the way you'd respond within minutes, the way your tone would shift the second she pulled away, the way you'd offer reassurances, even when you were the one hurting. At first, it felt like care, like reliability, but over time, what felt steady to you started feeling stale to her. You were always available, always explaining, always smoothing over tension before it had the chance to stretch. But what you didn't see then was how your emotional consistency slowly turned into background noise. The things she once appreciated became the things she overlooked, because when there's no friction, there's no fire. When everything is known, there's nothing left to explore. You thought being dependable would anchor her, but instead it gave her the illusion of control. And the more control she felt, the less presence she had to earn. She stopped leaning in because she already knew where you stood, and the man who once stirred emotion in her started fading, not because he lost value, but because he became predictable. Then, one day, you did something different. You didn't respond right away. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't follow the script. You broke the rhythm. You let the silence stretch. And in that gap, something shifted. She could no longer read you, couldn't anticipate your next move, couldn't decode your tone through a neatly worded response. For the first time in a long time, you became unfamiliar, unreachable. And that unfamiliarity didn't repel her, it drew her in. What's expected becomes unnoticed. But what's mysterious, that lingers, that unsettles, that reawakens her curiosity. Because attraction doesn't live in certainty. It lives in tension, in surprise, in the edges we can't quite define. And when you stopped offering her what she expected, you became more than just noticeable. You became unforgettable. You didn't stop caring. You stopped being predictable. And that was the first time she had to wonder whether she still mattered. Not because you played a game, but because you finally stopped playing hers. 3. Mystery makes her obsess. There was a time when she didn't have to wonder. You were emotionally transparent, open, expressive, accessible. If she pulled away, she knew you'd come closer. If she posted something vague, she could count on your message. Your energy was something she could trace without effort, like a familiar melody she had heard too many times. But now the music's gone. No updates, no signals, no emotional footprints for her to follow. She checks your page and finds nothing new. She revisits your last interaction and finds no unfinished thread to pick up. You've gone quiet, not in anger, not in retreat, but in a kind of calm that can't be read or redirected. And that silence, it doesn't just confuse her, it consumes her. Because a woman can only replay the past so many times before it starts to shift in her mind. What was once taken for granted begins to feel rare. What was once predictable starts to feel precious. She starts questioning what she thought she knew about you, about the dynamic, about her place in it all. Obsession doesn't begin when someone is fully present. It begins when they're suddenly gone. And you didn't just step back. You vanished from her emotional radar. You removed the thread she used to pull when she wanted your attention. Now she's left staring at a silence that doesn't respond and doesn't break. A silence that reflects nothing back. The mind hates uncertainty. And when there's no reaction to control, no tension to resolve, the brain does what it always does. It fills in the blanks. It romanticizes, rewrites, distorts. She begins to imagine versions of you that never existed before. Versions that are stronger, calmer, more grounded. Versions she never truly appreciated until they were no longer reachable. You used to be someone she could read. Now you're the question she can't answer. And it's not your presence she obsesses over, it's the void you left behind. Because when mystery replaces access, a woman doesn't just miss you, She starts chasing the version of you her imagination won't let her forget. 4. Peace hurts more than anger. You didn't slam the door on her. You didn't block her, curse her out, or make a scene. There was no dramatic exit, no last word meant to wound. What you did was quieter and far more permanent. You simply stepped back. Not because you were trying to punish her, but because you finally saw no reason to keep pouring your energy into something that no longer honored it. And that silence, that stillness, it didn't signal weakness, it signaled evolution. You didn't ghost her, you outgrew her. And that's a kind of goodbye most people aren't prepared for, because it doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't give her something to react to. It doesn't feed her need to feel important in your life anymore. She used to expect your attention like a given. She thought she could drift in and out of your world, and you'd always make space for her. She had gotten used to being the center of your emotional orbit. But now, that space she used to occupy feels locked, not slammed shut in bitterness, but sealed in quiet resolve. And she doesn't have the key anymore. She expected that if she ever walked away, you'd linger. That part of you would wait just in case she changed her mind. She counted on your loyalty turning into hesitation. But instead of missing her, you chose something she didn't expect: peace. And that hit her in a way anger never could. She expected to feel missed. Instead, she felt replaced by your peace. It's not that you stopped caring. You just stopped responding. You stopped being available to a cycle that drained you. You stopped showing up in places that only demanded your presence when it was convenient for her. And the absence of your energy, steady, grounded, warm, left a silence she couldn't ignore. What hurts more than rage is indifference. What leaves a deeper mark than words is the calm of a man who no longer needs to explain himself. Because anger still implies attachment. But peace? Peace says you've moved on without needing to be noticed. And when she realizes you didn't react because there was nothing left to say, she'll understand. It's not the noise that haunts her. It's the quiet of no longer mattering. 5. Detachment is power she can't ignore. Most men, when left behind, unravel. They rush to reclaim what slipped away. They explain, over-explain, hoping that clarity will bring her back. They try to show their worth through effort, chasing, proving, pleading. But not you. You didn't collapse beneath the weight of her absence. You didn't reach for her to restore your sense of value. You didn't try to make her see what she was walking away from. You chose something different. You chose yourself. You didn't speak to be heard. You stepped back to be still. You didn't react because you had nothing left to prove. Not to her, not to yourself. There was no need to beg someone to recognize the very things you had been offering all along. And in that quiet decision, you rose above the game. You didn't shut down. You sharpened. You didn't disappear out of weakness. You withdrew out of strength. You didn't raise your voice. You raised your standard. And while she may not have realized it immediately, something shifted. She felt it, not in your presence, but in the absence of your need for hers. That detachment wasn't cold. It was controlled. It wasn't bitterness. It was boundary. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. Because nothing is more attractive to a woman than a man who doesn't need her to validate his worth. A man who, even when left, doesn't beg to be chosen. He simply chooses differently. You didn't let go to make her regret it. You let go because holding on would have meant betraying your own peace. And that kind of detachment, the kind that comes not from ego but from clarity, is magnetic in a way words never are. She might not say it out loud, but she notices the lack of desperation, the presence of discipline, the way your silence speaks louder than any declaration ever could. And while others crumble under the weight of rejection, you stood quietly in your own power. Not to win her back, but to remember who you were before she questioned it. And that, more than anything, is what she'll never be able to forget. 6. You let her rewrite it alone. You didn't give her a dramatic ending to cling to. No final blow-up. No harsh goodbye she could use to justify walking away. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't send a stream of messages hoping to make her understand. You just stopped. Quietly. Completely. And in that stillness, you did something most men never do. You denied her the story she wanted to tell. She was prepared for a reaction. She expected some kind of chaos, some emotional rupture to label you by. Something she could point to and say, "See, that's why it didn't work." But you gave her none of that. You didn't fight for the last word. You didn't try to rewrite the narrative. Instead, you stepped out of it. You didn't rewrite the story. You stepped out of it. And that's what unsettled her, because now she's left alone with a memory she can't twist, with silence she can't explain away, with a version of you that doesn't make sense anymore, not because you changed into something worse, but because you left her with nothing new to judge you by. And slowly, the story begins to change, not because you rewrote it, but because she has nothing to reinforce the old one. The sharp edges she once remembered dull over time. The tension fades. The reasons she told herself it would never work start to feel small, maybe even unfair. Her certainty starts to soften, and in its place comes confusion. Without conflict to anchor her exit, she starts replaying moments she overlooked. The way you stayed patient. The way you listened when she didn't even have the words. The way you were present, solid, consistent, even when she took it for granted. Those memories, once buried under emotion, begin to rise. And now, she's stuck rereading a story that no longer fits her version of how things ended. Not because you tried to change her mind, but because you walked away without needing her to understand. And the silence you left behind became the ink she couldn't control. She's rewriting it now, but this time without you. And that's when it hurts most, when the story keeps echoing and you're no longer in it. 7. You outgrew the chaos. You used to respond to everything, the emotional swings, the passive-aggressive messages, the hot and cold behavior that left you questioning whether you were coming or going, not because you enjoyed it, but because you thought that's what love looked like, messy, intense, unpredictable. You believed that if you just held on long enough, things would settle, that if you explained yourself clearly enough, she'd finally hear you. But chaos doesn't need clarity. It feeds on reaction, and you began to see it for what it was, not passion, not love, but a pattern, a loop designed to keep you engaged, confused, exhausted, and the more you tried to reason with it, the more it drained you. That's when something inside you shifted, not with anger, not with hate, but with understanding. You didn't get bitter, you didn't get loud, you got still. Stillness didn't mean you gave up. It meant you stopped handing over your power every time she tested your peace. You no longer explained your worth to someone who only listened when it benefited her. You no longer fought to be understood in a space that mistook reaction for relevance. Your silence wasn't withdrawal, it was maturity, the kind that comes from surviving enough emotional noise to know the cost of your attention. You began to see your energy not as a tool to earn love, but as something to protect, something to redirect toward growth, not toward fixing what refused to be whole. And in that stillness, you reclaimed more than just your voice. You reclaimed your rhythm, your presence, your ability to walk away without needing to be chased or forgiven. You didn't disappear to teach her a lesson. You moved forward because the lesson was yours, to stop shrinking yourself for someone who only noticed your voice when it trembled. She may still try to provoke the old you, the reactive you, the one who fought to stay seen. But that man doesn't live here anymore. Because you didn't just leave the chaos behind, you outgrew it. And growth, when it's real, doesn't ask for permission. It just gets quiet and keeps going. 8. Her tests no longer work. Eventually the silence gets to her, not because she misses you deeply, but because she's no longer sure where she stands. She's used to having access, to seeing a reaction, to pulling your energy back into her orbit with the smallest gesture, a like on an old post, a vague story meant just for you, a casual message that says, "Hope you're good," but really asks, "Do I still have power over you?" It's not affection, it's strategy. She's testing the waters, not to reconnect, but to see if the old version of you still responds. The version that needed reassurance, that broke silence just to feel seen. The one that couldn't resist reaching back, even when he knew better. But this time you don't move, you don't bite, you don't perform, and every time you stay silent, something shifts. Not just in you, but in her. Because now every ignored breadcrumb becomes a mirror, a reflection she can't look away from. And in that reflection, she's forced to confront the truth. Her patterns no longer hold the power they once did. The rhythm she used to control has been broken. The buttons she used to push are disconnected. You didn't ignore her to punish her. You simply stopped playing a role that drained you. You chose stillness not out of pride, but out of principle. You've lived that story before, where you gave more than you got and mistook emotional confusion for connection. And now you've seen what happens when you mistake attention for love. So this time you don't return to the script. She may not admit it, but your lack of response says more than any message could. It tells her that the man who once needed her reactions to feel significant has become a man who defines his own value. And when her test doesn't work, not once, not twice, but again and again, she starts to wonder if you've moved on, or worse, if you've outgrown needing her entirely. That's what makes silence powerful. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of clarity. Because when her old games fail to bring the old you back, she realizes something she never wanted to face. The man she once controlled doesn't exist anymore. 9. She finds a man she can't reach. At some point she returns. It might not look like a grand apology or an obvious admission of regret. It may come in the form of a casual message, a memory she suddenly wants to share, or a question she already knows the answer to. But beneath the surface, her intent is clear. She wants to know if you're still the same man she left, if the door is still open, if your heart still waits. She expects to find familiarity. The man who once dropped everything to meet her halfway. The man who reassured her even when she pulled away. The man who was always emotionally available, even when it cost him his clarity. But this time, something's different. She returns, but finds someone she doesn't quite recognize. You didn't become cold. You became clear. You didn't harden. You healed. What she's facing now isn't bitterness. It's boundaries. Not distance born of spite, but presence built from peace. You're still kind, but you're no longer accessible in the same way. Still calm, but you no longer allow chaos to sit at your table. She senses it right away. The shift in your tone, the steadiness in your silence. You're not angry. You're not hoping. You're simply different, stronger, quieter, complete. And what unnerves her most isn't that you've changed. It's that you changed without needing her to see it. Because while she moved on thinking you'd wait, you were moving forward, becoming a man she no longer knows how to reach. The emotional access she once had has been closed off, not with a slammed door, but with quiet resolve. And now, no matter how familiar your face may be, the man behind it no longer bends for her validation. You didn't rebuild for revenge. You rebuilt because you finally understood your worth didn't require her recognition. And that's what hits hardest. Not that you're unavailable now, but that you never needed her to return in order to become whole. She thought she'd circle back to the same version of you, but now she stands in front of a man who no longer needs to be seen, because he finally sees himself. 10. Silence is what she remembers. Time will blur the details. The exact words that were said in that final conversation will fade. The tone, the tension, even the emotion behind it all, none of it will last the way she once thought it would. The drama she expected to define the ending will soften in her memory. The argument won't echo, the explanations won't stick, but the silence, that stays. Because silence isn't passive, it's presence withheld. It's the loudest answer you never gave. It's the weight of something final that can't be undone with words. And long after she forgets what she said to push you away, long after she stops replaying the moment she expected you to fight for her, she'll remember that you didn't. You didn't try to fix it. You didn't beg her to reconsider. You didn't send that last message explaining yourself just one more time. You didn't plead for understanding or closure. You just let it end. And in that ending, you created something she never expected to carry with her. Doubt. She'll never forget you, because you said nothing. And in that nothing, you left space. Space for her to wonder what you were thinking. Space to imagine what you would have said. Space to regret what she assumed would be there forever. Your attention, your words, your heart. She thought you'd return eventually, if only to bring the story to a close. But you didn't. You didn't chase closure. You became it. Because real closure doesn't come from a perfect goodbye. It comes from peace. From a man who no longer needs to explain who he is to someone who didn't stay to find out. From a man who understands that the most powerful statement is not made with volume, but with stillness. And while others may come and go in her life, loud, temporary, forgettable, you'll remain. Not because you said something unforgettable, but because your silence made her listen to everything she refused to hear while you were still there. If you've made it this far, understand this. You're not alone in what you've felt. The silence you chose wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Most men, when a woman pulls away, scramble to reclaim something. They chase, over-explain, and slowly erode their own center in the process. But you didn't. You stepped back, not to get a reaction, but because you finally saw the cost of being too available, too predictable, too emotionally exposed to someone who no longer saw your value. And that's where everything changed. She expected drama, you gave her stillness. She expected access, you gave her distance. She expected the old version of you. What she found was a man she could no longer reach. And the truth? That silence you held, calm, unbothered, self-directed, spoke louder than any declaration. You didn't chase closure. You became it. You didn't shrink when she left. You expanded where she couldn't follow. So what's the lesson here? Never make noise to prove your worth. Never trade your peace for a performance. A man becomes unforgettable not by demanding attention, but by mastering his absence. And the moment she realizes you're no longer waiting is the moment she finally hears what your silence always knew. You weren't the one who lost her. She was the one who lost access to the man you became in her absence. If this message resonated with you, don't let it fade. Let it anchor you. Let it guide your next step. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and stay with us. Where silence isn't retreat, it's revelation. And stillness, it becomes the quiet force that shapes your future.